Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I'm your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about Iran attacking Israel, and the abortion issue continues to make headlines, and more. Before we get started, listeners, I wanted to remind you to please follow on your favorite podcast platform, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would greatly appreciate it. And to get started, we're going to be kicking it off with some probably the most breaking news of what we're talking about today. It's the Iranian attacks on Israel that were conducted over the weekend, missile launches. Luckily, the Iron Dome and Israelis' defense systems pretty much knocked down all the missiles that were coming to them. I think some got by. The only report I heard about somebody being injured from the incident was a 7-year-old Israeli Arab girl. But this is just sort of another event that's just stirring up what's already a big international mess.
Well, yeah, I saw that, I don't know how many got through either, but I saw, some of the damage. I know that some did get through.
Right,
I saw,
okay.
a cafe got exploded and some other things. But the only thing I wanted to tuck in there before you moved on was, I know that there was such a barrage over these last couple of days. I saw some of the footage from it. I mean, it was just it was almost like a fireworks show, but a very morbid and scary one.
Of course.
But they also, Israel had a lot of help from the United States and France. We were also shooting down a lot of the incoming missiles or bombs or whatever they were from Iran.
Right.
So just want to get that in there. They did have help.
Right, yeah, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've already heard people talk about how part of, the administration's response is that Israel should just take this as a win and move on, not worry about retaliating against Iran. Which I understand where they're coming from in a way, but I don't think not doing anything is actually going to deter Iran from doing anything else. Again, in my opinion, I think they would need to respond to it in some manner.
I firmly believe, and once you just clarified that's your opinion. I'm going to clarify this is just my opinion. I firmly believe Israel should do whatever it thinks is best to defend itself. The thing that scares me and has scared me from the beginning, is I just got in that point about how we were assisting Israel. Well, I don't want to see us go to war with Iran.
Right.
And I don't agree with that. I don't think our government should start bombing Iran and all of this. So I don't know. The whole thing scares me. I mean, in a way,
is scary.
I don't want to see Israel fire back because I don't want to see a larger war.
Right.
But in a way, I also don't think that they should just stand there and take it.
Right. Because I've already been asked to cease fire against their, invasion in Gaza to go after Hamas, and which I think is kind of funny, and there's very few people I hear continually pointing this out. But there are at least reported 5 American hostages still being held by Hamas, and it wasn't that long ago where the Biden administration unfroze $6 billion for Iran in exchange for 5 American hostages. But now we're not, we have 5 American hostages in Gaza, and from my understanding, we're not even sure if they're all still alive or not. And we're telling Israel you gotta be careful. You can't go in too hard because too many civilians will die, which is certainly unfortunate. That's a casualty in any war. But nobody's, talking about how the onus should be on Hamas, the terrorist group, to protect their own citizens, but they don't care about them.
Well, and really, I say that I'm afraid of a larger war with Iran, But one of the things that I think is absolutely unfortunate from this pickle, as well as the Ukrainian thing, now I don't want to bring that in right now. Maybe I'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
But I think in a way, this has been inevitable because from the beginning, we've known that Hamas is backed by Iran.
Right.
They're basically a little
offshoot.
Yeah, offshoot of Iran.
Right. And they got several of those, like, around the area. What we've talked about, like the Houthis and Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, I believe.
Yep. Well, and in a way, you know, it sort of is like the people who can read the tea leaves know. I promise you, some people have known that we are going to wind up at war with Iran.
Right.
From the beginning. Just like, now here's where I see a parallel. I think it's just a matter of time before we are at war with Russia over this Ukraine thing.
Right.
Because that doesn't seem like it's ever going to fizzle out either.
No. I think in part because nobody's really coming forward with what the plan is, other than we just have to hold back Russia, and I guess that's it. What exactly does that mean? Because it seems like the Ukrainians would like to get them out completely, even out of Crimea. And from my understanding, from people who say that they're experts, and some people I'm sure are well qualified to speak on it, say that's not likely to happen. Because Crimea is a ethnically Russian area heavily, and a lot of the people support Russia, and they've been there for a decade. Russia has in Crimea.
I think it's just going to get worse. I think Russia, they want Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think next they're going to move forward and try to take Kyiv.
Right.
So yeah. I don't know what this idea of just keeping them back, keeping them behind a line,
right.
Don't let them march any further. Well, they're going to.
Right. Yeah. And that's what some people's fears are. Is if they do retake Ukraine, they're going to keep going for their old, Soviet satellite blocks.
Absolutely.
Because that's Putin's plan. He's former KGB, and I don't think it's that deniable. That's what his plans are. Because I'm pretty sure he's talked about it before.
He wants to put the USSR back together.
Yeah, he'd like to reunify.
Mm-hmm. And it's once again, we've said this, we've covered it on the channel. We've said, I hope it doesn't wind up this way. I hope it doesn't wind up this way. Again, today, I hope it doesn't wind up this way. But it just seems like we keep inching closer and closer to these,
right. Well, because what's his face? I get him mixed up. I think it's Anthony Blinken.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not the deep voice guy. That's Lloyd Austin. Yeah. So Anthony Blinken, I'm pretty sure, is the one recently I heard saying that Ukraine will join NATO.
Well, that's a bad idea.
Right. The question is when, because they make it sound like they want it to happen really soon. Because if that does happen,
well, then we've got World War III.
Right, because there's the Article 5. I don't know the exact language because I haven't looked at it, but my understanding Article 5 is the one where
it's an attack on one is an attack on all.
Yes, yeah, that's how it's summarized. And that would immediately mean Russia is attacking Ukraine, so we have to go in as part of NATO.
Yep. Well, as NATO.
Yeah.
You might call us NATO, for goodness sakes.
Right.
We're the ones who fund it and keep it going and keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's to our benefit. We created NATO.
Right, yeah. Right. Exactly. But speaking of NATO, I was listening to sort of a couple of stories that were somewhat related. Talking about North Korea and some of the problems there, and how some of these Southeast Asian nations are kind of trying to make their own kind of version of NATO to protect against China and North Korea. And to connect this to Russia, one of the things that both stories that I'll have links to is that North Korea is supplying ammunition and armament to Russia, and then Russia is, of course, giving them money and other supplies, sending them back. And their relationship, Russia and North Korea, has gotten so cozy that even China's kind of concerned about it. So if China's concerned with the North Korean and Russia relationship, we certainly should be too. And my opinion hasn't really changed. That I think primarily China is our biggest threat, but Russia is certainly not to be ignored. And I think this is just one of those things we're going to have to keep an eye on because it's benefiting Russia and their war against Ukraine. And in turn, North Korea is being benefited. And they've still been conducting tons of missile tests and things like that.
Yeah. Well, in Russia, remember we covered it not too long ago, but Russia just pulled out of that accord that they had with us that said they wouldn't be testing. So they're so that goes hand in hand. North Korea is testing, Russia's testing again. I mean, it just seems like we're all poking a bear,
Right. Yeah. And when Kim Jong-un met with Putin last fall, in the story from the Fox News Rundown with, I believe his name's Ian Brennan from the Eurasia Group, he said that the way that China found out about it was on the TV. So they weren't even aware that this meeting was going to be taking place. And it caught them off guard. So it's definitely seems like, kind of like I said, it's more tense situation.
Well, I think the scariest thing about Russia is all of their nukes. I mean, because they've got, I think, as far as the official numbers go, I think they have more than we do right now. I think they've got like 6,000 some odd nukes compared to our 5,000 some odd nukes. Right. But otherwise, if you just look at national economies, Russia and North Korea are like not very scary.
Right.
Paper tigers, you might say. And again, I think this is where it goes to China. They are the bigger threat to the United States.
Right.
But, it just depends on how you want to look at it.
Right.
Because their economy could probably eat ours. But Russia could probably just level us, our topography. So which is scarier? Which is going to happen sooner? That's the question.
Right. Yeah. It's unfortunately we live in a world of superpowers, and the question is, who's going to be the number one superpower? And are we going to let it be Russia or China or even an ally? Do we really expect somebody like Canada or the UK to become the world leader, so to speak? I don't think so.
I think that's part of the real trouble here. Is I don't think it's going to be any of the traditional Western countries. It's going to be some newer, somebody like a China or somebody like a Russia that's never, been in this place before.
Yeah, if we're not careful, yeah. Because that's kind of what I was going to get into. I mean, it's going to have to be us if we don't, start, I guess, making better choices when it comes to our international affairs.
Yeah.
Because, it's the world's not a vacuum. Everything will eventually have some kind of effect on how things are here in our country.
Well, and we need to clean up. I mean, thank God there's an election. Hopefully something good will come of it for once, because these people, Joe Biden, who's reigned forever, Anthony Blinken, who's like a little whispering idiot. I don't know what to say about him. Don't like him. Lloyd Austin, don't like him. That Milley, oh my gosh, does he need to be removed? I mean, I could just give you a list, and these are the people in power.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so hopefully, if Trump becomes president, we'll see a little bit more stability internationally.
Yeah.
But who knows? Because in both of those stories about North Korea, the people being interviewed both commented that like China and North Korea and some of the other Asian countries, even our ally Asian countries, are less certain about a Trump presidency, which is understandable because in one of them they're talking about more about Japan, how for the Japanese leaders, for whatever reason, it was hard to work with Trump because he was kind of unpredictable, and there were like economic factors that impacted Japan that made it hard for them.
Well, sure, they do a lot of manufacturing over there.
Yeah.
I could understand that. I mean, with the tariffs and everything on the cars, and I drive a Japanese car, so I could understand where they're coming from, but there are other things that I don't get. Like, Biden has been awfully cozy with... I can't think of that fella's name who runs Japan right now. I feel like it's like Moody or something.
Oh, no.
Come up with it.
That's India. Whose name I think you're trying to think of. Well, I mean, I was just going to say the last point that, at least in one of these interviews, the one that was on the Fox News Rundown, the guy that was talking did say, at least in comparison to the other areas of our foreign affairs, Joe Biden is having the most luck with our Asian allies. Which I guess if that's true and it's actually benefiting us and them, I mean, that's good. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I suppose.
Right, sure. I mean, I suppose too, because I don't certainly have the full understanding of, everything that's going on over there.
Well, that's more of where I was coming from. Is I doubt Joe Biden does either. But
sure.
If it's good for the country, then so be it.
Yeah. Right. Well, I guess to bring it on home, you had our first home side story.
Yeah. This, I hope, will be an interesting discussion. I saw just a quip. Oh my gosh, I still can't say it. A quick little news clip about, it was put out by the Epoch Times, about how lots of these blue states are passing what they call NPVIC laws, which stands for a National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So these states who, because like Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Trump won the Electoral College. These people who hate the Electoral College, they're basically trying to undo it, sidestep it, by signing these interstate compacts that say that they're all going to have their electors go with the national vote.
Right.
And to me, it's really interesting because they've already got what would be 205 Electoral College votes, which is 76% of what it would take to make it a president.
Yes, 270 is the magic number.
Yeah, and they're already at 205 have signed these interstate compacts. And at first, I didn't really think anything of it. I thought, oh, nice try for them. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, wait a minute. What if they ever did get to 270 or 275 or 280 or, you know what I'm saying, with some majority? Wouldn't that basically undo the parts of the Constitution that outline the Electoral College and what it was made for? Doesn't it sort of undo the spirit of our founders?
Right. Well, it sounds like they would just be completely rejecting the results of that anyway and just deciding how to do it themselves without regard to what the rules may be.
Yeah, which to me is just interesting. Like, it's not happening yet. It's not happening now. These states, I guess these laws are just proposed in some of the states and that they haven't all been passed. But there's such a large group of these states trying to pass these laws or trying to put this in place.
Right.
That I almost wonder, like, surely this would have to go up to the Supreme Court at some point.
Yeah,
because
it seems like it.
Absolutely. And I just don't know. I mean, I get the spirit of what they're trying to do, but they are American states living under the American Constitution. So I just want to know what they really think they're doing from a legal standpoint. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. And what just occurred to me is if they enact this, do the voters know when they're going to, I mean, I should say, would the voters know, not do they? Would the voters know when they go to vote that their vote is actually being considered on a completely different criteria than what would be assumed or expected?
Right. I understand what you mean,
Yeah.
because they think they're voting under one system, but
Right.
do they understand that it's been changed and
Right.
that they're now part of a national vote system?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Right.
And I also think that another good point, I think another interesting thing to consider would be the fact that these people are unhappy. You know, like what I've just said. You know, Hillary Clinton won the national vote against Trump, and probably Al Gore won the national vote against Bush. I'm not saying that for a fact, but probably.
Right.
Okay. And so that's the spirit of where they're coming from, is they keep having these near losses. And, you know, especially with Hillary Clinton,
Right.
if they had done popular vote, if that were the law of the land, the way we worked, she would have been president.
Right.
Well, I guarantee you, these are the types of people that if they instituted this, and then somehow somebody like a Donald Trump won the national election, they'd be saying, "Oh, well, this is unconstitutional. We've got to go back to the electoral college."
Right, yeah.
This is crazy.
Once they start losing under their own rules, they're like, "Oh, that doesn't work anymore. We got to change it again."
That's right.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how, like, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent, but like the Supreme Court, when they don't get their way with the court, they just want to change the court.
Right.
So, but other countries kind of do the whole popular vote thing. One of the, I guess I haven't verified this myself, but I don't see why Steven Crowder would be wrong about it. But when he kind of talks about the subject, that in Canada, the Prime Minister there, Justin Trudeau, only won with 30% of the vote of Canadians.
How is that?
Because they don't do majority vote. I guess the other 70% had been divvied up among other people, but he still got the most percentage of the vote.
Wow.
So 70% of the people didn't want Justin Trudeau to be the prime minister, but because he won the popular vote, got the most percentage, one guy of only 30%, he's the prime minister.
See, and that's why, I mean, I really don't think that these people understand that they're playing with fire.
Yeah.
Because the founders of this country were so intelligent. And I think it's a beautiful system that they've designed. You know, they weighted it in such a way that California doesn't really have any more powerful of a vote. Now they do, but than Rhode Island. At least they have they're on the same field.
Right.
You know, I mean, one may be bigger than the other still, but at least Rhode Island's not just out of the picture.
Right.
Totally inconsequential.
Right.
You know, they tried to weight the votes so that little West Virginians would matter up against California.
Right.
You know, and under any other system, I guarantee you, people's voices would be snuffed out.
Right.
Rhode Island wouldn't matter. West Virginia wouldn't matter.
Right, and that's like one of the common arguments against the popular vote, because they say candidates would only have to go to like 3 cities: New York, Chicago, L.A. Boom. You know, as long as everybody in those major cities, you know, and surrounding areas vote for you, you got like almost half the country.
Yeah.
Because of the way the population is.
Well, and how could anybody want that? I mean, if you were a liberal voter in, I don't know, Florida, why would you want this system? I don't understand it. I mean, it's easy to jump on a bandwagon and say, you know, if Hillary Clinton, if we did the blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But how many times it's like I said. I guarantee you, if they saw it in practice,
Mm-hmm.
they'd be turning tail just like they do and saying, "Oh no, we
Right.
can't have this anymore."
Yeah.
And I promise you, they probably still wouldn't say, "What were we thinking?" They would say, "This government's corrupt," or they'd blame it on somebody else or something else.
Right. Of course.
Wouldn't even be able to see what they'd done, just like these people who are going from California to Texas and voting Democrat.
Right.
I mean, it's just, I don't see what's wrong with these people.
I don't either. What else was I gonna say? Oh, it's you were talking about like the founders, the way they set it up, seemingly so perfectly. They believe that the majority should rule, but the rights of the minority should still be respected. So, given that, obviously, the people who, the person who has the majority vote should be the winner. Not like in Canada where one guy somehow only gets 30% of the vote,
Right.
and he's the winner when a clear majority of the country didn't want that guy to be the winner.
Right.
So I think it's important to maintain the system that we got.
I think so too. And another thing that I'd like to point out before we move on out of
Sure.
the segment is that I'm sure, I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm positive, I would bet my life on it,
Mm-hmm.
that there are times that the Electoral College vote and the national popular vote go hand in hand. That
Right.
there's a clear consensus.
Right.
So,
Well, I believe that was the case this last 2020. I'm pretty sure, not 2020. Was it 2021? One of the recent elections, I think, didn't Joe Biden get both popular and,
probably so, yeah.
yeah, because he would have had to the electoral. So, yeah, I know he got the popular vote, so I mean, obviously he got the electoral vote.
Yeah.
So, yeah, see, like, that's it. Like, it does go hand in hand in some cases.
Yeah, so in some cases, it's very clear, and you wouldn't need to go one way or the other, or flip-flop, or have it this way or have it that way.
Mm-hmm.
The only times that there's issues with this question is when they don't go hand in hand, where
Right.
it's one or the other,
Uh-huh.
and the Electoral College decides.
Right.
But it was designed that way for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's my soapbox. So,
Right. Yep. Well, I mean, to make one last point, that's still kind of relative. One of the full measure stories I heard recently, there's a lot of places trying to institute this ranked choice voting system, like Alaska recently did, and there's plenty of other like cities that do it. So I thought it was kind of interesting that you had a story related to voting, and I just recently listened to that.
oh, okay. What's the right choice thing? I'm not familiar.
The ranked choice.
Oh, ranked. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did hear about that because Alaska. Yeah,
Right.
I am familiar with that actually.
Yeah. I guess I was just bringing that up because it makes me think of that. That I just listened to that, and it seems like people are definitely kind of, in some ways, displeased with the way the system works. But in my view, I think it's because everybody, like especially a lot of the Democrats, harp on this popular vote so much, and it sounds nice.
Yeah.
It does sound like, oh yeah, the guy who got the most popular vote should be the person, but that's not our system. And it was like you just said, it's not that way for a reason.
Well, right, and that ranked choice thing, that is more of a British parliamentary kind of design. And I believe in the early days of this country that we actually did have something kind of like that. That's how they chose the president and vice president, was in sort of a first, second, third, sort of a
Right.
pecking order. And there were often times that, people weren't voting for the vice president.
Right.
The vice president was decided because he came in second place
Right.
in the presidential bid.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just whoever got the first place was president, and
Right.
whoever got second place was vice president.
Right.
So I don't know how well that worked. I mean, that it obviously got changed.
Right. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how our voting laws continue to develop, even, 200 and some odd years later after they've been implemented.
Yep. And I will say, they did make the Constitution a living document, but we can change it. So
Right.
it'll be interesting, but that's why I wanted to talk about this, is because I almost see that it either would have to go to the Supreme Court or there would have to be an act of Congress, a constitutional, whatever they call it. I'm sorry?
Amendment?
Yeah, they'd have to amend the Constitution, but
Yeah.
they do like I'm trying to come up with the proper phrase where they have to convene a constitutional assembly, or I don't know. I can't think of what it is right now, but
I can't think of it either, but I do know what you're talking about.
yeah, but they'd have to do something like that, it seems. I mean, it doesn't seem to me, I'm no legal expert, but it doesn't seem to me that these states are able to just switch the country over to being a national popular vote.
Just because they all agreed on it like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because to me, like I said to you in the warm-up before we went on air, is it almost seems like a confederation in a way,
Right.
Like Civil War kind of stuff.
Right. Like they're trying to elect their own president.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Well, I guess speaking of founding fathers, one of the big reasons why the American Revolution happened is because of taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Well, today as we're
Big
recording,
part of it. Yep.
yeah. Well, obviously, there's certainly more to it. But that's one of the more famous stories.
Yep.
But today as we're recording is tax day, April 15th. Hope you guys paid your taxes if you owe any. So I wanted to kind of talk about, I guess, taxes in general, and I guess related to the fact that I recently heard that the 2017 tax cuts that were enacted during Trump's presidency are set to expire at the end of this year, or maybe next year, sometime soon. And of course, the Biden administration has vowed to, increase taxes for the rich and the wealthy, and make sure nobody who makes under $400,000 pays a penny more in taxes or some stuff like that.
His stuff is right.
Stuff is right. Yeah. But we've sort of talked about in the past this taxing the rich and making them pay their fair share, and what exactly that's supposed to mean according to proponents of that. And I recently was listening to, I believe it was a Morning Wire podcast episode about it. And the lady they were talking to pointed out the statistic that like 1% of people pay almost 50% of the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that supposed to be fair? I mean, talking about fair shares, if you ask the average person on the street if that's fair, they'd say no. So if we're going to play the fair share game, the people who should be paying more taxes is actually like you and me. Which, of course, I'm not trying to promote. I prefer everybody pay less taxes.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody's supposed to be paying the fair share, it's certainly not the rich and the wealthy. Because they pay plenty in taxes. And while thinking about this, while I was listening to the episode, something I haven't heard too many people talk about when talking about this argument is that the rich people and wealthy people often have multiple sources of income.
Right.
So just by that fact alone, they presumably pay more taxes than the average person would, because they have more income to be taxed, more streams of income to be taxed, and different sources and all. So I thought that was kind of, I guess I don't really know how much that goes towards making an argument against the idea of fair share, but I think it does, because your average person might only, even if you're working two jobs and you want to consider that different sources of income, but it's one type of income.
Wages.
Yes, your wages. Whereas, like, a high net worth person usually has, well, they usually don't even have wages like a W-2. They have, like,
They may still.
in a way. But they got, like, investment income and other assets that produce income, businesses, things like that, which all on their own have different types of taxation involved with them.
True.
And business owners, the owner themselves pay a tax on the income from the business, but the business pays taxes. And in some cases, corporations are individuals, so, there's plenty of rich people are paying their taxes, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I have a few things to say.
Sure.
I used to work in taxes,
right.
And I haven't been doing that for a while, but it is tax day today, and I've just had to help out a friend and do my own taxes. I still have yet to pay, but they'll get their money. I promise they'll get their money. But let's see here. I was going to say, first of all, I think I'll pick on your
Sure.
pay their fair share thing before I come back to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But as far as pay their fair share, I do understand, probably better than some of our listeners, let's say, that the rich and wealthy do pay.
Mm-hmm.
They pay out the nose. They pay lots of money. Like you quoted, only 1% of people pay the majority of taxes, or whatever that point was that you made there.
I think it's almost half.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, to pay big dollars, you have to make big dollars.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do know that there are some things that they could do. They could change some things.
Sure.
The first thing that pops into my mind is the long-term capital gains rate has been locked in at 15% for years and years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a short-term capital gain, it gets taxed at ordinary levels. So if you're in a 35% bracket, you pay income tax at 35% on your short-term gain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on a long-term gain, it's 15 across the board every year, year after year, over and over and over.
Right.
Well, I understand some of the arguments both for and against this. Because people say, oh, you start taxing capital gains, you're not going to have investment. People won't invest their money. People won't start businesses. People won't, the economy won't boom.
Sure.
But I do think there is a parity between 15% and the ordinary income rates.
Right.
If you're in a 35% bracket and you think, oh, well, maybe I won't take this stock out until 365 days have passed, because then it'll be a long-term gain and I'll save myself 20% on my tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certain people, like wealthy individuals, they know how to do that.
Right.
The average person, not so much, maybe.
Sure.
So I think that you could probably do little things like that, like make the long-term capital gains rate a little closer to ordinary income. The ordinary income tax rate that you're in. Maybe bump it up to 20%. I mean, would that end the world?
No.
I doubt it.
Right. I mean, and that's the kind of stuff I can agree with. I mean, it'd be nice to have a more simplified tax code and structure with less complexity to it.
But see, that's where I was actually going to lead to. I'm a big believer. Now, I've never seen it in practice, and I'm not an economist.
Sure.
But just on its merits, on the theory of it, I just believe in a flat tax.
Right.
I think if you just said everybody's income taxes is 10%, 10% of what you make,
right?
Period, across the board, no matter who you are, rich, wealthy, poor, black, white, Hispanic, no matter what, 10%. Well, still, the wealthy people would still be paying the most, because 10% of $1 million is a lot more than 10% of 50,000.
Yep. Right.
And that's fair, isn't it? We're all paying the same rate, and the wealthy are still paying the most.
Yep. Yeah.
What's wrong with a system like that? I'd love to know. I would love to know.
Right.
But to get back to what you were talking about, which I do find very interesting, I'd like to make a good point on this because I was working in the tax field when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act came into existence. I was still there working in the tax office, and there was a lot of buzz about it. A lot of people wanted to know, well, how is this going to impact my taxes? What's going to change? And there were changes.
Right,
He made big changes to, like the federal withholding structure and how much gets taken out every paycheck. And people saw some hiccups because there wasn't as much withholding. Now, their tax rate was also lower, which is why there wasn't as much withheld. But personally, I saw a lot of people whose refunds weren't as large as they were used to because not as much was being taken out of their paychecks as they were used to. Now, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but, I believe it's better for a family, for a person, to have your money throughout the year anyway, other than to have it sitting in the federal government's accounts. But one of the things that I can guarantee you, and I think we'll be revisiting something we said in the last segment, but the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act lowered everybody's effective rates. Yeah. Everybody's. No matter who you are, across the board, not just the rich, like these people like to say on TV. So the fact that they're expiring is, I promise you, people are going to see an uptick in their personal income tax rates. And you guys had better be ready for it, everybody out there, because otherwise, I think this is just going to be horrible for Joe Biden. I really do. Once it takes effect and people see after a year has gone by and they pay their taxes again, ouch. So I hate it for myself because I don't want to pay more, but I can't wait to see the blowback on the current administration, the current Congress, whatever. I guess you can't just blame Biden on this one, but but the fact that they're allowing this to expire is sad, in my opinion, very sad.
Yeah, definitely, I think so. I mean, like I tried to hint at a little bit ago, there are plenty of changes that can be made to the tax system for. I don't really like saying take advantage of it because it's if it's in the tax code, it's there to be used.
Yeah, it's legal.
Right. But it can certainly be more simplified and make it less complex for your average person to have those advantages that other people get, that they're able to pay people who know what they're doing to take care of it for them. Not everybody's able to do that.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I think it's going to be a firestorm. I think people will storm the Capitol, but we'll see.
Oh, yep. Is that going to be our Tea Party, the expiration of the tax cuts?
Well, the thing is I think the people on the right can see that this is coming. I think so. I think it's going to be the people on the left who are taken by this because already, costs of everything across the board is up under Joe Biden. Everything.
Yeah.
And even as much as they try to spin it, the numbers that just came out say inflation's up another 3%.
Right. It's been killing the market.
So they can say what they want. But then when this goes into effect...
Oh, yeah, it's going to get worse.
I don't see how people are even going to be able to hold water for Joe Biden anymore. Because they'll be out there spinning it and saying, oh, well, your Christmas ham was 1 cent cheaper than it was last year. And I swear people are going to want to turn him into a Christmas ham.
Yeah.
Cook him.
Well, he's going to be cooked, metaphorically speaking, at the election.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Well, I guess that's all I had on the taxes. Hopefully, Congress will keep them in place, or it'd be nice if they even made it better. And like I said earlier, it'd be nice to see a simpler tax code that benefits everybody. And I guess that's all I got.
Well, I'm sure if we keep the House and Trump gets in, I'm sure you will see this corrected, you know. So, Well, anyway, to move on to the last thing I think we'll cover in this segment is just, it's not something I even really wanted to bring up here today, but I just had a lunch with some friends of mine, and it does seem like a lot of people are talking about all of this abortion stuff. You know, it's an election year, and there are some things going on. There's a case up before the Supreme Court, and, you know, some different things about abortion. And so here I am at lunch with friends of mine, and we get on to abortion, and it's like, wow, I didn't see this coming up today, but apparently a lot of people are talking about it. I saw a clip. I'll have to find a link to put it in the show notes, but Whoopi Goldberg on The View was just going off about this.
She goes off with everything.
I know, she's getting unhinged here lately. I think they're gonna have to cancel her contract if she's not careful, because she's just like unhinged, truly. But what really upset her, I wanted to bring this up because I do think it's an interesting question, but you know, Arizona's Supreme Court just upheld an 1864 law that basically outright bans abortion. Like almost literally just banned. And that's got some people up in arms. And the point that I do find interesting here that I wanted to maybe get your opinion on, or the viewers, the listeners here, if they write into us or leave a comment on YouTube here or whatever, but Arizona wasn't even a state in 1864.
Right.
So isn't there a question there, like how can the state Supreme Court uphold a law that was on the books before Arizona was even a state? Like, how does that make sense? Doesn't it seem like you would want sort of an update on this instead of going that far back to before they were even...
Yeah, I guess I see where you're coming from. The only thing that comes to my mind is I'm sure there are tons of laws around the country that were in place before, you know, territories became states that still exist. So it almost would seem like the only way they get changed is, you know, of course, through the act of Congress to change them, or until they're challenged.
And you would mean the Congress within the state, right? The state Congress.
Right.
But see, that's what I think is interesting, is maybe I should have done a little more digging before we went to air, but it almost seems to me that there would be updates in Arizona. I mean, a lot of time's gone by.
The only thing I've heard about is there is some kind of law that's supposedly on the book, I think, that the former governor had put in place. I don't know. No, I haven't looked into it, so I'm not sure why it's not officially the law. But I believe there was something that the last governor had, I forget what the term is they use. Some kind of thing that's supposed to take over.
Yeah, like supersede.
Yeah, something like that. But like I said, I'm not sure why it's not the current law and why the Supreme Court would have been going back to this old law. But it is interesting. I do think it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, that's the only point I mean, I do not support abortion, and I don't think that they made a mistake. But I can see how such a thing does kind of give
credence.
I guess so. Give them a little leeway.
Sure.
Give leeway towards these people who, you know, think that the government's just out to get them, and they want to force pregnant people to have these babies.
Right.
You know, that stuff that they say.
Yeah.
But out of all that yelling and screaming that Whoopi was doing the other day, that's the only thing that I feel like did have any kind of merit that came out of her mouth, is like, yeah, I can see a question there.
Sure.
You know?
Right.
But otherwise, you know, I think it'll be interesting. I also wanted to get your opinion, just sort of to be pithy, you know, about this mifepristone case that's still before the Supreme Court, the FDA versus the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been decided yet. There's still, I mean, they've done the oral arguments and everything, but no decisions come out. So I just wanted to ask you tacitly, how do you think the Supreme Court will fall? And do you think that this Plan B pill is like it should be outlawed, in sort of the same way, or should it be a state by state issue like they did with Dobbs? Or what do you think of the mifepristone case?
Well, I don't know too much about it. The only thing I could probably provide you my opinion on, like the use of the pill in general. But I do want to clarify, at least from my understanding, the case is not necessarily about the pill itself. It's more about standing. It's a question of standing, whether these doctors can challenge the FDA about some rules regarding this, the pill.
Well, that's very fair. But all I wanted to point out, too, is, a lot of people are talking about this.
Right.
It's good that you made that clarification. But a lot of people are talking about it as if, this is just the next step. First they did Dobbs. Now they want mifepristone off the market. It again goes to this idea that it's giving some kind of leeway to these people who are just abortion advocates,
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think the use of the pill, I suppose, should be left to the states, because if it's classified as just another form of abortion, Dobbs has already decided that questions of abortion are to be left to the states, even if I don't necessarily agree with whatever a particular individual state might say about it. So I guess, in general, it should go back to the states.
Well, what about just in general? Let me put it to you this way. Do you see use of mifepristone, Plan B, as some people call it, that's, I think, is a big
like a brand name.
Brand, exactly, yeah. Would you put that on the same par as an actual medical abortion performed by a doctor and everything? I mean, do you see it in the same light?
I don't know.
It's a big question.
I guess personally, if we're talking personally, then sure, because it's terminating the process of the pregnancy. I mean, in terms of severity, I suppose I wouldn't put them in the same group. But I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't really know exactly what all's medically happening. So it's hard to say. I don't really know. It's a tough one.
I think it's tough too, and my personal credo would probably just be to look the other way on mifepristone, because at least we're not talking. I want to put it to you this way: we live here in Ohio, and when Mike DeWine got put into office, he was a big champion of the heartbeat bill. And for me, that's just so clear cut. I don't see how anybody could argue against that. Right. If a fetal heartbeat can be detected, you cannot argue that that is not life.
Right. Yeah.
Now, from a religious standpoint and everything, okay, of course, mifepristone should be banned, should not be available.
Sure,
but
yeah, right.
As far as, this is practically a secular world anymore, Most people aren't religious and everything. And from a state's point of view, like as far as state control, state government, state law kind of thing, if Dobbs is going to stand, which I think it should, and some of these states like Ohio have this heartbeat bill, which we should have, I love it, I don't see anything wrong from a secular stance of just looking the other way on the mifepristone thing. And the only reason I wanted to say it that way is, like, I'm glad you made your distinction about what this case is about. But I've also seen from sort of the writing on the wall, it looks like the Supreme Court is going to do that, kind of look the other way on this mifepristone thing and not really do anything. Just leave it with the lower court's decision.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that makes sense to me. And I know recently a lot of people were talking about Trump's video finally making his, I guess, campaign stance on the issue.
yeah, I was going to bring that
issue.
up too, and he said it should be a state issue,
Right,
and that there,
mm-hmm.
since Dobbs, there doesn't need to be any more federal abortion laws.
Right.
Didn't he? Were you going to say anything else?
Well, I was just going to mention that a lot of people are, well, certainly people on the left don't like what he's saying, because they still believe that, despite what he's saying, if he becomes the president, he'll try to pass some kind of federal ban. But even people on the right are upset with him because he's not made for taking a moral stance against it.
Right.
Which, of course, I would love to hear Trump come out and say, clearly that abortion is wrong. But I'm also not, I don't really quite understand why so many Republicans are upset with him. Because, I'm just speaking from my opinion, but I think he'd kind of be lying to the people. Because this is Donald Trump we're talking about.
Right.
I certainly don't know him personally, but from his, public history, I get the sense that he, compared to a lot more conservative people, is a lot softer on this issue. And for him to essentially come out and say, abortion is completely and morally wrong, it could be, going against what he himself even believes. And maybe he does believe that, and I guess maybe he should say it if that's what he believes. But I don't get the sense that he is, or does believe that strongly in it. And I don't necessarily have a problem with him not making it quite that clear in his statement. I think what he said about it being left to the states is right.
It is right constitutionally. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, politically and constitutionally, it was the right statement. But from a societal and a moral level, our country's not quite there yet to push some kind of federal legislation on it. I think we're too divided on it, and we'd have to have a better consensus about it before anything meaningful can happen on a federal level.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll come a time, but I don't know that it's the right moment. And
sure. Yeah.
I will say this as well, that, I don't know Trump either. I wish I did. I really have a lot of respect for the man. I think I'd really enjoy his company if we could ever sit down and hear some of his stories and things. But anyway, I think it's interesting. I want to pick on something you said. You said you think he's kind of softer on this issue than some other people might be.
Yeah, from my opinion, what my public perception. Like I said, I could be very well wrong. I'd like to be wrong. This is something I'd like to be wrong on.
Well, I just wanted to point out, I don't think he's soft, but I understand exactly where you're coming from, because this is literally all I wanted to pick on was that word soft. Otherwise, I don't really have anything to say.
Sure,
but I see him more as a popularist.
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from.
Right.
Because he's a popularist, doesn't really want to offend. Oh, is that what you want? Right. I've heard him say that to people before. Would that make you happy? Is that what you want?
Right.
And he's kind of like a pleaser in that kind of way. But he does have a backbone.
Right.
And I bet you, in his heart of hearts, he knows that it's wrong, and he probably doesn't believe in it. But, when you have a nation of millions of people, it is, it's hard to find a balance between that, especially in an election cycle.
Right, of course. Yeah, I would agree. Soft's probably not the
I just think it's
word.
Funny. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. You said soft on the issue. You didn't call him soft.
Right.
I just think it's interesting because, some people might say that. I don't see anything wrong with it, but I just see it as he's a popularist.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Yep. I can agree with that.
But otherwise, the only thing I have to add to any of that is that, Ron DeSantis was out too. And he's talked about this issue. And he's saying that, I guess in the fall, potentially there's a constitutional amendment in Florida that's up to be voted on.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're going to, quote unquote, protect and expand, unquote, abortion, quote unquote, rights, because I love that. I have to put abortion rights in air quotes because that's
favorite
just so
is
ridiculous.
Reproductive rights, when the whole point of getting an abortion is not to be reproductive. But yeah, they're euphemisms.
Yes, they're euphemisms, but I just think that's, I don't know. There's a lot going on with the abortion thing. It's making a lot of people upset. I don't know.
It's like, it's the biggest issue that the Democrats have command over. I will say that. I mean, at least where where they usually win the most.
Yeah. I don't know why either. They've got people so convinced. I mean, even that friend of mine, I hate to bring this up. I wasn't prepared at lunch. But, they're sitting there talking about rapes and incest. And it's like, oh my gosh. I wasn't ready. But that the statistics just don't bear that out. But everybody you talk to says that. They always say, well, what about this? And it's like, well, do you know the numbers on that? Right. And here I was at lunch. I wasn't ready. I'm not about to get into it with these people, but the data does not bear out what the popular consensus is. So this needs to be addressed somehow. Somebody needs to go around and educate people on the actual abortion numbers.
Right. Well, I guess that's what our job is, and pro-life advocates, that's what we got to do now.
Yeah.
It took 50 years to get the Dobbs decision, and it's going to take another 50 years or more to, really correct course.
Yeah.
Was that all you got on that story?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got today, listeners. Do you got any last words, Frank?
Nope, I can't say that I do.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed this great conservative conversations, please be sure to follow on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Just search Conservative Conversations. And you can also subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Just search at Conservative Conversations 92, and we should come up. We'd love it if you subscribe.
And if you find yourself getting bored with the news, you could always go over to our Wiki Wacky radio show and check out some alternative content. We've had some interesting things put up over there, getting some decent traction. So we would encourage you to do that, if you are getting tired of the news. But as always, we thank you for listening.